Many of us struggle to find our passion, struggle to find our purpose, and maybe what we love, for some reason we don't love anymore. And we have to make a change. And if we're looking for encouragement, this room aside, this community aside, you're not going to find it in the media. I mean, have you noticed that all of the advertising, all of the media for younger people is about ambition and opportunity, and all of it that targets older people is about our fear and our insecurities. Risking anything can become difficult, and we feel trapped. And Amy Sweezey was trapped. I like to say, I don't know if she's ever heard me say this, but I like to say she was trapped in a gilded cage. She was a beloved on-air personality. She had a sweet salary. She had a clothing allowance. She had a glamorous job, but something was missing. She wrote two award-winning books. She was named National Broadcaster of the Year, but yet something was missing. And it is trite, but it is true. When you got nothing to lose. But when you have all of that, it ain't easy. So how did she walk away at the top of her career? Why did she walk away at the top of her career, and how is it going? I know she's going to give us the unvarnished truth. My friend, Amy Sweezey.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here in the Villages tonight. And Mark, by the way, the clothing allowance, that went away years ago. So let's just be clear. So my 25-year TV weather career actually began by accident. When I left my TV weather career in 2020, it was not an accident. I walked away of my own free will, despite what my coworkers said, despite what a lot of viewers said, and many called me crazy. First, my accidental beginning. Unlike a lot of my colleagues, I did not have a tornado tear through my town when I was a kid and decide from that moment on, I'm going to be a weather woman someday. I didn't build weather radios in my parents' basement. I went to college the first time to be a newspaper writer. And my sort of turn into TV weather came about in a sort of roundabout way with some twists and turns, but it did send me back to college for a second time in order to get my meteorological training. I learned early on that it's really important to not pass up an opportunity just because it's not exactly what you want, because really you never know where it might lead, and that's kind of what was going on with me. Now, my path from news over to weather was not an easy one. It wasn't a straight path. There were lots of twists and turns, and I can tell you there were a whole lot of no's from potential bosses telling me I could not make it on TV and I needed to find a job behind the scenes. But I buckled down. I knew I had to go back to school, and so I'm like, okay, I have to do the work. So even though I had fallen into this career by accident, I knew that I had to do the work in order to reap the rewards. After all, I was raised by a working mom and a former Marine who was a Vietnam vet, and there was no way that I was going to be an uneducated woman working in a science field dominated by men and be called a weather girl for the rest of my career. So for me, going back to school really wasn't an option. I knew that I needed to go, and I needed to sort of reinvent myself, if you will. And little did I know that reinventing myself then in my 20s, all of those lessons that I learned, they were going to come in quite handy for me nearly 30 years later when I left my full-time job to pursue something more. So yes, I did get into this career by accident, but my what's next, choosing my what's next a couple of years ago, that was not an accident. Now, it was not easy. It was probably the most difficult decision that I've ever had to make in my life. I was scared to death. Now, of course, hindsight's 20/20, right? So now I can look back and say, oh, best decision ever. But at the time, it was tough. I took a huge chance. I took a leap off of a cliff. I followed my heart instead of my head, and I made this huge change right on the cusp of turning 50. So that's the best thing about reinvention. It doesn't have an expiration date. You can reinvent yourself at any age. Life is not over when you're 50. Life isn't over when you're 60. Life is not over when you're 70, 80, 90, 100, beyond. Life is over when it's over, right? I understand that not everyone gets to make this choice. They don't get to leave their job of their own free will, on their own terms. I didn't take it for granted. In fact, I assumed that I would eventually be pushed out of my job, like so many women in TV are. I mean, really, think about it. How many 60-year-old women do you see anchoring a local TV newscast? Not very many. How about a chief meteorologist, 60-year-old female? Yeah, me neither. How many 60-year-old men do you see anchoring a newscast or chief meteorologist? Yeah, I lost count too. Here's the thing, this is not a slam on men, not at all. This is a slam on the industry that values longevity and experience and even wrinkles and gray hair in men, but it despises the same thing in women. Thank you. And ladies, let me offer up this side note. Almost every email that I received, 90% of the emails I received criticizing my hair, my clothes, my makeup, something about my appearance that was negative that had nothing to do with my forecasting ability, it almost always came from a woman. She was almost always over the age of 50, and she just needed to share her opinion. Ladies, let's build each other up, right? Let's do it. Friends who are over 50, let's encourage each other. Let's encourage our pursuits and not get caught up in this ageist mindset that we've been taught our entire lives and that's all pervasive in our culture. So instead of being forced out, right, or not having my contract renewed, I left before that may or may not have happened to me. I didn't really know for sure, but I started planning and thinking and figuring out and making my pros and cons lists. And for about 2 years, my husband and I sat down with our budget and said, can I do this? Nope, we can't. Oh, maybe, nope, I mean, this was a tough decision to walk away. And while we were going through this, I truly had no idea where I was going to end up. Of course, add in a pandemic where suddenly I couldn't even be in public places anymore, and that kind of changed things up for me as well. So I didn't really know what what's next was going to be when I walked away from this job. And let me tell you, was I filled with the yes buts. Ever heard of a yes but? This is a conversation that we have with ourselves quite often. Yes, she quit her job to pursue her passion to paint, but she doesn't have any kids. Yes, he left corporate America to go write his book, but his wife is a doctor. Yes, they sold their house and they bought an RV and they're touring around the country, but their parents left them a huge inheritance. Yes, but. The yes, but conversation will always convince you that others can do what you cannot. The yes, but conversation will always convince you that others deserve what you do not. Don't rob yourself of an opportunity because of a yes, but. So yes, a lot of people thought I was crazy to walk away from this great, what they thought was a lucrative job with supposedly a clothing allowance, but But a lot of it was that they were focused on what I was giving up instead of on what I was gaining. And I was focused on what I was gaining. I was giving up a 10 and 12-hour workday and a 50 and 60-hour work week to gain more time with my family. I was giving up working weekends and holidays and every time there was a tornado warning to choose my own schedule. I gave up waking up at 2 a.m. every day, living in a constant state of tired, to sleep like a normal person and go to bed when normal people go to bed, right? I gave up dressing for consultants and viewers and bosses to dress the way that makes me happy. I gave up being forbidden to have any side jobs. Couldn't speak at groups like this, not able to sell my children's weather books, to now being able to pretty much explore any paid gig I want. I gave up helping my employers meet their goals to instead put my own dreams into action in order to meet my goals. What about you? Have you given up a piece of yourself to do something that you didn't really want to do or you didn't really choose? Even if you're retired, is there something that you should give up that maybe is robbing you of your joy or robbing you of something that you could gain if you were to give it up? One of the big things that I have learned in my nearly 30 years of meteorology is that life is a lot like weather. It's a big concept that I've kind of come to the realization of. And I have what I call my forecast for life. It's made up of 4 key principles. The first one is that weather constantly changes. We know this, right? The earth doesn't just stand still. The earth rotates, it rotates around the sun. Everything that makes up the weather is constantly moving and constantly changing. Life is always changing as well. We have sunshine and blue sky days, and we have stormy and hurricane days, right? The other thing, the second key principle, is that weather can't be controlled. Just like our lives can't be controlled, neither can the weather. Weather won't change if we complain. That's the third key principle. You can complain all you want about, oh, how that rain ruined it, or oh, how that meteorologist got it wrong again. But I'm telling you, complaining isn't going to change it, right? And of course, the fourth key principle is that the weather won't change if you worry about it. You can worry all day long that it's going to rain on Saturday at your granddaughter's wedding, and guess what? No matter how much you worry, you cannot stop the rain. You cannot change the rain. Have you ever seen this meme? It's a quote from Irma Bombeck. Remember her? Funny author back in the day. Worrying is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it never gets you anywhere. I have this saved on my phone so I can constantly look at it and remind myself to stop worrying about things. So if we can't worry and we can't complain in order to change the weather, in order to change our lives, what can we do instead? Well, we let go of what we can't control and we focus on what we can. Look for ways to turn tough circumstances into opportunities for growth and wellness. So what kinds of things can you control? Well, you can control your attitude, right? I always tell my kids, you can't control other people. You can only control your reaction to them. You can control your diet. Eat your fruits and vegetables instead of all the Snickers bars. You know, your mom says it, your doctor says it. Keep your immune system strong. You can choose when and how much to exercise. You don't have to go run 25 miles. You can walk to the mailbox, and then you walk to the end of the street, and then maybe you walk around the block, and then you go 2 times around the block. You can start small, right? You don't have to start off as a marathon runner. What else can we control? We can control our mindset. We can practice gratitude. What can I find to be thankful for in this circumstance? What can I learn from this bad situation, tough situation, stormy situation in my life? There's a common phrase in weather that is about flooding that actually reminds me of practicing gratitude. Maybe you've heard it before on the news. Perhaps it's turn around, don't drown. This was a slogan that was started by the National Weather, like a campaign slogan started by the National Weather Service several years ago. And they started it because they realized that more than half of all flood-related drownings occurred when a car would drive through a flooded road. I mean, think about that. More than half of all flood-related deaths could be avoided if people just didn't drive their car through a flooded street. This can be applied to your life too. As you approach that situation, that flooded road, that thing that could drag you under, the illness, this negative circumstance, instead of going through it and not knowing if the road is washed out and getting pulled under and allowing it to pull you under, instead you turn around. How do you turn around? How do you not drown in the floodwaters of life? You practice gratitude. You find sunshine in the storm. And I know sometimes that's hard to do. Sometimes you have to find the teeny tiniest little thing to be positive about when all of this negative stuff is surrounding you. But if you can focus even on that small little positive thing, to me, that's the best way that I have found to be able to navigate through the so-called floodwaters of life and turn around and not drown in them. The other thing that I've learned about life and weather that I try to apply to life about the weather is that resilience is really key to surviving the storms of life. Have you ever noticed that palm trees withstand hurricane force winds better than other trees? After a hurricane comes through, trees are knocked down, fences are blown over, but the palm trees are often left standing. And that's because they can bend and flex and adapt. In fact, royal palms can bend 40 to 50 degrees and not break. That's because they don't have branches like other trees. And the other trees are rigid. So palm trees have better tools for survival. Now, a hurricane will still beat them up. They lose their fronds, but they're often the last tree left standing after a hurricane comes through. So my question to you is, are you resilient like a palm tree? If something isn't going your way and something is beyond your control that's in your path, can you come to grips with the fact that the world doesn't work the way we want it to all the time? We have to decide how we're going to react to a situation. Do you wrestle control away from the powers that be, or can you adapt to the change and rise above the challenge? Resilience doesn't take pain away. I understand that there's pain in this room, perhaps a recent cancer diagnosis, another illness. Maybe you've just lost someone close to you, maybe a dementia diagnosis. Pain is real in life. And it's not just a flippant, suck it up, be resilient, you'll be fine. No, resilience won't take that pain away. It will just help improve your ability to handle the challenges that are inevitably headed our way. So again, I ask, are you resilient? And if not, what can you do to build your resilience? This is my forecast for Growing Bolder. If you want to live your best life with passion and purpose, right, while discovering your what's next, while reinventing yourself at any age, find thankfulness, practice gratitude. Find your tribe. That's what we call it at Growing Bolder. Find your people if you don't have your people. The village is a great place to find your tribe and find your people. Are your closest friends people who build you up while holding you accountable? Or are your closest friends people who tear you down? Eat healthy, exercise, take care of yourself, take time for mental breaks, get adequate sleep, right? All of these things so that when the rain arrives in your life, if you can bend and flex and adapt, you're better able to withstand those wind gusts that will inevitably try to blow you over. Remember, the sun is always shining, right? At night, we don't see it because of the Earth's rotation. On a cloudy day, the sun is still there. On a stormy day, the sun is still there, but you can't see it unless you rise above the clouds and the storms. Storms can't be stopped. They're still going to come. They can't be avoided. The only thing that we can do is prepare. And preparation comes from knowing the forecast. So as you move forward in your own transitions and finding your own what's next, remember this. Life, just like weather, constantly changes. Complaining about it won't change it. Worrying about it won't change it. Storms won't last forever, right? We have to be resilient. We have to practice gratitude so that we don't get pulled under in the floodwaters of life. My career began by accident, but leaving to find my what's next was not an accident. Using my forecast for growing bolder can help you too find your passion and purpose while being prepared for the storms of life. Thank you.